And what I want to do is, first of all, really welcome everybody who's joining us today. And we'll probably have some that will trickle in as we move into the noon hour. Um, Today, we're going to talk about something that I think that a lot of people are grappling with right now. And so, obviously, AI. And as educators, maybe we've got a little bit of trepidation about it. Maybe we've got a little concern about it. Maybe we're already enthusiastic users, but however it is, any way that shoe fits, AI is here. And it's really changing all spheres of our lives and how we live and how we learn and how we engage in our businesses. And what I really want to focus on today is that connection between AI and humans and what we need to do as we look ahead to help our students and the next generation, and frankly, even ourselves, because this is happening so quickly, to be prepared for this future that's really going to involve AI. So, for those of you who are just meeting me, I'm Betsy Hill, president of Brainware Learning Company. With me is Dr. Lou Whitaker, my colleague, who is our director of cognitive training. And we're both kind of uh, nerds when it comes to brain science and education. So we're just delighted to be here today. We are recording this, and the recording will be available. If you registered, which all of you are who are on today, you will automatically get a link tomorrow when the recording, the replay is available. So you can look forward to that. A copy of the slides is also available. Happy to share those. You can either use this QR code or you can look in the chat and use that link that we've posted. And finally, if you requested a certificate of attendance for professional development purposes, we will be getting those out to you probably by the end of the week. If it takes us a little bit longer, it really depends on numbers, but usually just a few days we'll have that to you. So keep a lookout in your inbox. You might also want to check your spam folder because for some reason those certificates seem to have a little magnet sometimes that goes to that. So, I'd like to start with a little poll, and I'm going to figure out, oops, I'm just blocking it here so we can get just a little sense of um, sort of how we're all feeling about this whole idea of AI. So I've launched it. You should see it on your screen. There are a couple of questions. So if you could go ahead and choose them. The first question is, how do you feel about AI in your daily life?
I don't see it yet, Betsy.
You don't
Just
see it.
no.
Well, I launched it. Why is this
It
not
says all went away. Oops.
ended?
That's what people are
Webinar
commenting.
poll. Oh, well, relaunch poll. Continue.
There we go. I see it now.
Okay, I just had to launch it again, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so think about how you feel about AI in your daily life these days. Oh, I'm seeing some answers now. So obviously the poll is working. And then on the last one, how you would describe how you're um, all right. Well, there are a couple of people who are very confident and know how to get really good results. So unfortunately, I don't know who you are. So otherwise, you'd be my new best friends.
I was going to say we'll be tapping you on the shoulder. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're still getting responses, so I'll leave it running just for a moment here. It seems to be settling down. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Oops, wait a minute. There's another answer. Maybe I'll wait. 32, 30. Okay. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So, Lou, can you see the results now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So we have groups in every bucket, but cautious and curious are the most common responses. It's kind of evenly split there, and that accounts for most of our attendees today. There are definitely some who are concerned, and there are some who are excited. So we've, and probably on many days, I feel all those things all at the same time. So I had a hard time kind of picking where I would fall. And how do you describe to use AI efficiently? So we have a group that are novice and not having done it yet, not very confident is about half of our attendees today. Somewhat confident and very confident. I think there's some days when I would say very confident, and I do use AI a lot, but every time I wake up and there's something new, I go back into the somewhat confident. I mean, I know I'm using it, but I also know I could use it more. So, all right. Thanks everybody for doing that. That gives us kind of a good perspective. Now, if we look, so we had about sort of half positive, half negative. Was that what you're feeling, Lou?
Yeah, we're
So
all
there was
just
actually in the general population, Fox News recently did a poll, and about 40% of the population was negative, with the
You might
most
want
common
I'm just
concerns
saying
being.
you can close the poll now. It's still on the screen.
I think you can close it.
Got it. Yep. Each
So I've
person.
closed it, but everybody
I
needs to
got it.
close their own. Yeah.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, that initial reaction is a negative one at this point. Fear and lack of trust. And one of the common fears that people have is that it will replace jobs, because that's been in the news a fair amount. And there are a lot of different predictions about the extent to which AI is predicted to displace workers and work. And so here are some, sources: McKinsey, the IMF, the US Department of Labor, the World Economic Forum. And it ranges from, maybe, 9, as you see in the US Department of Labor, 9 to 47% of jobs could be automated. But on the other hand, the estimates are that pretty much every job will be impacted in one way or another. And that certain activities, those routine tasks, standardized tasks, those that are predictable, repetitive, which frankly is just fine with me, because there are plenty of boring things that we all have to do, that it would be great not to have to do those as much. And I love this. The last one from the World Economic Forum is, we're going to get a lot of job displacement, but almost basically twice as many new jobs being created as those that are being displaced, because it creates so many opportunities as things change. So we're going to dig some more into what this means. But right now, I'd like everybody to think about, what is one thing you would never want AI to replace? So just go ahead and type in the chat.
There are some great comments in there.
Your therapist,
Yeah.
work with kids, human connection, relationships. Yep. So my answer is my hairdresser, because only, I mean, really, why do you? That's like the first thing that came to my mind. Doctors and dentists, nursing, one-on-one meetings. Yeah, I don't have my one-on-one meetings with my AI are not that wonderful. They sort of lose interest after a while. The ability to be human with my own emotions. Absolutely.
Yes.
Real travel.
Yeah.
No, none of that virtual reality stuff
Right.
for Donna. Okay. All right. All right. Creativity. Absolutely. Absolutely. So those were great answers. And it really kind of underscores the fact that there are things that AI cannot do. So AI is pretty amazing. And it seems like everyone's had at least a little bit of experience or kind of has a little inkling of what it's all about. But particularly when we're talking about experience that most people have, some is it's with a chat bot, and everybody's had a real mixture of experiences, I'm sure, with those. But what we're going to talk about and refer to mostly is the potential of what are called large language models, LLMs, like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any of those that you may have played around with. If you're not sure whether you've experienced AI doing something for you, just go to your open Chrome and just ask a question, because now what you're going to see on Chrome, this is just a screen capture, is this initial thing. It's taking the place of where the ads used to be. You get your AI overview. So I asked a question about social and emotional skills just to kind of see what the answer would be. And then it goes into a reference, but it's so virtually everybody, as long as you're ever asking a question or doing anything on search, you're now actually using AI, whether you realize that you were going to do that or not. So wanted to talk just real briefly because I realized that I had my high school reunion over this past weekend, and I'm not going to tell you how old we all are, but we can count in decades, not years. So, and it was very interesting, and I think that the reactions when we started talking about AI were very similar to that general population and to the attitudes and feelings of this group. And some of them didn't really know what all this means. And basically what these models do is analyze and generate a human-like text by learning patterns from massive data sets. So if you just think of putting everything in the world that was ever written about a topic into a big vat of some kind, and AI can basically very, very quickly analyze all that. But remember, it is a human-like text. It is not human text. Mm-hmm. It is a learning pattern. It is not learning. It's recognizing patterns, and it's simply using them there's no learning or understanding going on. And massive data sets means that whatever is going to come out of it is dependent on what's in the data set. So it is great at summarizing information, at translating languages, answering questions, creating content. But remember, it's human-like text. It's not human text. It's learning patterns. It's not really understanding them. And it is really dependent on these data sets. It's statistical prediction. And so it's using, what's known and statistically based on the occurrence of words and combinations of words and text. That's what it will generate for you. And it can be incredibly useful, but it's also not knowledge the way that we really think about knowledge and human understanding. So it's real fast. It recognizes patterns. It can automate things very, very effectively. But it's not going to tell you why you should pay attention to it. It's not going to tell you the context. It's not going to judge a value. AI can't tell you whether something is good or bad. It can't make a decision. I mean, it generates things, but it doesn't make those unless you provide it with criteria, but then that's sort of humans providing with criteria. It's truly just predicting based on existing knowledge. And so when some of the responses in the chat just now were about human connections and creativity and values and those kinds of things, and that is absolutely the limit. And so we understanding that it's not going to replace those and it's not going to do those kinds of things. AI doesn't replace thinking, but what it is going to do is change the demands on thinking. So we still have to think, but the way that we're going to have to think is going to have to be amped up a little bit, frankly.
Oh.
So in the category of things that people are concerned about, people are concerned that we're going to get dumber as we rely on AI. So one of the concerns, of course, is over-reliance on these amazing tools. And there's a very interesting study that was done recently. It's this in 2025, it was published, so it's this year, that had 54 participants, college students, who were divided into 3 groups, and they participated in 4 sessions over a period of 4 months. One group was told to use ChatGPT, which is one of the large language models. One was told to use a search engine as part of their work, and the other group was told only to use what they know and what's in their brains. So we call them the brain only group. And then what happened was they would come in and they would, for 20 minutes, they were asked to write an essay and they were given a topic. And so they would do that. And then they did that for 3 monthly sessions. And then in the 4th, they switched the brain only and the LLM group. So the LLM group can only use their brain, and the brain group were asked to use the LLM, ChatGPT. So fascinating what came out of this. And there are several findings. They monitored brain activity with EEG was one of the measures. And then they also evaluated the quality of the writing, and they got feedback from the participants. So in terms of what was generated in terms of these essays, the brain-only group showed a lot of variability in how participants approached topics. So it was very diverse. It was very dependent on their own experiences. The LLM group produced statistically homogeneous essays within each topic. So a very common approach. So if you want to produce an essay that sounds like everything else that has ever been written, LLM will do that. If you really want to explore a topic from a unique and human perspective, that is not what you would do. The EEG analysis showed very different patterns of neural activation. And the brain-only group showed activation, the strongest activation across wide-ranging networks all over the brain. The LLM group did not. They showed the least. And it was reduced actually by like 55% of the activation, and specifically in areas that we know are responsible for executive function, for semantic processing of meaning, and attention regulation. So there's something very different going on when you're writing cognitively, which makes sense to us. Intuitively, I think everybody gets that. But this is a measure that makes it very clear how different these processes are. Not only that, I found these just absolutely fascinating and a little scary. The LLM users, most of them had difficulty when they were asked to quote, tell me, repeat something that you said in your essay. None of them could actually do it. None of them could quote sufficiently with sufficient semantic precision. The correct quoting was best for the brain only group. So obviously when we've created it, it's something that's it's going to be a lot easier for us to reproduce then. And we can also talk, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about working memory and how important it is if we're holding it working memory and revising and regrouping and trying to figure out how to state something with a bunch of ideas. We're keeping it active long enough in working memory to create some longer term memory, which may not happen with LLM. The brain-only group claimed full ownership of their tests almost unanimously. The LLM group was fragmented and conflicted. Some of them said, oh, yes, this is mine. I'm responsible for this. But a lot of the students were conflicted. I don't know if this really feels like mine. I don't know if it really feels like it belongs to me. When they switched over in session 4, the LLM and the brain-only group, there was some improvement for overall brain connectivity for the LLM group that then did the brain-only, but it was still not nearly as much as the brain-only group. So if you rely on something as a process, it will have an impact on how you approach that similar type of task over time. The brain-only group actually showed good, strong brain connectivity when the third time. So it's really pattern of what you're used to and what you expect. And also, I would say, we got to think about what this means in several ways. First of all, there was no instruction on how to use the tools. Most people are familiar with search, but there was no instruction about how to use it. They had 20 minutes to write the essay. So if I only have 20 minutes and I have a tool that's going to produce something, it's going to be a lot easier to rely on what the LLM tells us. There didn't seem to be any particular motivation for the activity. So it's not, you're going to have to defend your views, or we're going to have a discussion of the views later where people would want to kind of ensure that what they're putting in their essay really represented their own beliefs, or that it was important to be accurate. That was important that they did get better at quoting towards the end once they realized they were going to be asked to quote from their essay. So it's really, there's a lot about instruction and direction but the concern about over-reliance is real. And also, on the other hand, though, the concern about the resistance to using these tools is real too, because they have so much potential and they can do, and they are going to be doing a lot. So fascinating research in my mind. So since we're talking about the impact on these cognitive skills, what we want to do is now talk about cognitive skills and what these are, and so that we can then come back and focus on what this new technology means for cognitive development, basically, and for the kinds of skills that as humans we are going to especially need in this new world. And Lou, I'm going to count on you to be checking the chat every once in a while and see if we have any questions.
There's some really good conversation going on here. It's really quite interesting. John asked, he said, the real question is which essay is actually the most accurate and useful. But Kensley said, it's a tool. It's like an encyclopedia, was a tool. It just does a lot more. So yeah, there's some great conversation going on here at the side. So
great. Well,
I think keep going. Yeah.
It's a topic. Now that I talk about it, I'm going to bore everybody to death with all my discussions. But so when we talk about cognitive skills, what we're talking about is the mental processes we use for learning, for thinking, and pretty much to engage in all of our everyday activities. There are a bunch of what we call them foundational cognitive skills, and they're represented in this bottom step on this little pyramid chart. These are things like attention and visual processing and auditory processing and processing speed. So the basic ways that information gets into our brains from the outside world. And so if those are happening efficiently and accurately, that's great. We get a good start to that learning process. The next step up are a special group of cognitive skills called executive functions. And you'll notice that there are actually two tiers here where we use the term executive functions. And the core executive functions are the basic cognitive processes. These are identifiable cognitive processes that allow us to, they're called executive functions because they're the directive or the control kinds of abilities of our mind, and includes working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. And then the tier up from that includes a bunch of sort of higher cognitive functions, or here we've referred to them as higher order executive functions, that really require all of these skills underneath them in order to function. And then when we get up to what we do in school, that in turn requires everything below this on the chart, even to learn to read or to do math. And we're not going to go into that today, but if you are interested in that we have other presentations where we talk about the relationship to specific curriculum and text and topics and skills, academic skills and things like that. So in terms of figuring out what AI is going to displace and what it is that it can't, one of the things that I thought was really helpful was to look at the list of skills that companies say the workplace is going to need more and more and more of, especially as AI becomes more pervasive even than it is. And if you ask companies like Google or Meta or Amazon or others what their workers are going to need, most of the list of skills that they think are important, and pretty much everybody else, is not technology, although technological skills there's certainly going to be a need for more of those. But in some ways, those are so dependent on the specific technology that they're kind of perishable. So they might, you might understand a given technology, but you're going to have to keep up with it as it changes and changes quickly. So things like adaptability and critical thinking and innovation and social emotional skills and higher cognitive skills. So this is the kind of list that you get if you ask this question. And it's really about when you look at this whole list, I think this last one on the list is really telling lifelong learning, which is we have to learn and relearn and unlearn and then relearn again over our lifetimes. That process can't stop or we are obsolete. We don't have the set of skills. And these become increasingly important when we get into the world of AI. So just wanted to, again, call out these executive functions because these are the ones that really relate the most directly to these skills. And we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit later, but just to kind of put a stamp and a big, nice, bright visual to help your brain pay attention to this and how important it is. So working memory, holding information in our minds while we think about it, and we think about those relationships. So whatever's going on in your mind right now is working memory. And so if it's listening to me or paying attention to this or maybe doing something else, that's what's happening in working memory. Inhibitory control, pretty much what it sounds like, our ability to stop ourselves from doing something we otherwise would do. And then cognitive flexibility, pretty much the same thing as adaptability. It's our ability to shift gears, to adjust to change in the world around us. So if we think about how these relate to the demands of the workplace in the age of AI, so take cognitive flexibility first. And as I said, it's pretty much synonymous with adaptability. Everything is, AI is changing so many things right now. It's changing hiring processes, how potential new employees are being evaluated. It's impacting how reports get written, how software is developed, how marketing materials are created, how we understand customer insights. You can basically go through everything, every part of an organization, and there is some impact that is taking place that where AI is shifting things, where we in turn as humans responsible for these processes and interacting with these processes and experiencing these processes also have to make adjustments. I think there are a couple here that are also really worth calling out, which is it's not just the shifts in what we do. So learning as the new processes come into being and are implemented, but the fact that our own roles are going to change on a minute-to-minute, day-to-day basis between being the specialist who knows a lot of information and then also being a generalist, somebody who can see the big picture and understands how it all fits together, which is the part that humans have to do. And that depending on what AI supports there are or aren't. And so it's going to require probably a wider range of modes of operating, of levels of insight and perspective than perhaps we've had to have in the past. And that's really hard to do if our cognitive flexibility is not well developed. Oh, there's so many examples of that. So it's kind of going from I never use AI to how can I use AI? And that's the mind shift that is happening. All right, working memory. So one way to think about each of these skills is to come up with a scenario, which I'm big on scenarios and examples. So pretend you're in a strategy meeting for your organization and you've got an AI tool that is, I didn't turn mine on in Zoom today, but those of you who use Zoom probably know you can now get AI to transcribe and summarize in real time while the discussion is going on, and then it can produce a summary afterwards. So let's pretend we're talking about our customers and new products we might have or new market opportunities, and the discussion's going on and various people are presenting ideas and AI is generating the key points and summarizing and also adding in suggestions. And if we're coordinating and directing this process, we have to hold a whole lot of stuff in working memory, what AI captured versus what it was said, because AI is not perfect. We want to make sure that it actually accurately reflects what somebody was saying, because it may or may not. Integrate, the nuances with the summary, make sure that we're capturing those, decide what points to highlight, decide what goes into the parking lot versus what's going to be our priorities. All of that requires really strong working memory. Now, this isn't really any different than any meeting you've ever been to where someone needs to coordinate all these activities and thoughts and ideas. However, it does happen faster and is even a heavier load when in terms of our cognitive human process with AI. It's supposed to make it easier, And it certainly is doing a lot of things. I don't have to try it. In some ways, I guess it's easier. We don't have to take notes crazy like or have somebody taking notes. But what we have is that real-time ability to start to integrate and think and prioritize. And all of that requires good working memory. Inhibitory control. So say you're a high school teacher and you've asked AI to help you plan a lesson or a series of lessons, a unit on the civil rights movement, and you look at it and it looks thorough and well structured and engaging. What do we need to do cognitively now? So what should be happening cognitively is that the teacher pauses, uses inhibitory control, and evaluates the lesson plan critically, which means using mental energy that maybe we don't feel like using at that particular moment, but we have to. And we're going to probably then modify the lessons to include deeper inquiry questions, primary source analysis, space for student reflection. So the teacher and the class are an essential part of the learning process. It's not, we can't just ask AI to create things because only the human, only the teacher knows what the true objective is. And the teacher is the one who understands how human beings learn. So we could and AI will probably get better at doing this and understanding the criteria, but there's nothing like having taught civil rights for 20 years to know how students engage with it and the kinds of concerns and ideas that they have and what it's going to take to get them to really engage with the material deeply and extensively enough to have long-term learning going on. So that's what humans do, not what AI does. Mm-hmm. And here's another example of the importance of domain expertise and context for considering AI output. This actually wasn't AI output, but it certainly, I think, could have been. There's this math program that I came across on the web that said a recipe calls for 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs, 2 1/4 cups of tomato sauce, and 1/2 cup of tomato paste. How many cups of ingredients are used altogether in the recipe? So this is an educated group. I'm guessing that you all came up with 3.5 cups as the answer to that, but is that the best answer? Here's the difference between how AI answers that question and how I would answer that question. So this is really tiny, but you'll be able to see it. It's just you write down the ingredients with the things, and you change all the fractions so that they're easier to add, blah, 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 and you come up with 3.5 cups. Here's my solution. That is the most disgusting idea of a recipe that I have almost ever read. If you read those, breadcrumbs, tomato sauce, tomato paste, that would be completely unpalatable. No cook would ever think of that as a recipe. There have to be missing ingredients. And obviously the answer is more than 3.5, or else the answer is not enough information. So AI is not going to come up with that. The AI is not going to give you the context where it is. And frankly, this is kind of a reminder also that when we give kids what we tell them are real world problems, we ought to be able to have them truly put it in a context. And maybe if we actually had them measure it and make the recipe a real recipe, not this recipe, because they would never go in your classroom again. So the next couple of slides, what they do is look at those higher order cognitive skills that everyone's telling us we're going to need more of in this AI world, and looks at the contribution or the role that our executive functions, these core executive functions, are going to play. So whether it's planning or organizing or communicating. So just to take, a couple of them, planning, you're going to have this on the slide, so I'm not going to read through everything. But planning, obviously, we have to keep the steps and the deadlines in mind, and we have to organize them, and we have to keep them in order, and we have to stop ourselves from skipping over something that we might otherwise do to make sure that we get things in the right order. And then what's something we all absolutely know about planning is that plans are essential. Planning is essential, but plans are useless because when you get to the reality of whatever that situation is, you're probably going to have to modify and adapt it as the circumstances change. Think about communication, tone and language. I love the adjusting tone and language, especially cognitive flexibility in the context of communication. So only a human can determine what that tone means and what body language means, at least at this point. And that's really, really important. And the ability to change a tone. So you can instruct AI, you can instruct ChatGPT to change its tone. You can tell them, I want you to do, this should be a formal tone. This should be, pretend I'm sitting with my, third grade classroom. Pretend but you have to direct it to do that. Humans just switch based on their environment and their situation.
Mm-hmm.
On this next batch, we might think about creativity and executive functions, which are really essential there. And, there's sometimes when AI can seem pretty creative, it might come up with things that you wouldn't have thought of, and that can seem creative. This past weekend, in fact, Lou and I were just talking about this with my reunion group. I created, with the help of AI, a list of quotes that were allegedly from famous people. Some of them were real quotes, and some of them were quotes that were made up by AI. None of my classmates got more than about 50% right. One did a little bit better than that. But basically what you would do by random chance, by just completely guessing randomly. So that means ChatGPT did a great job, but think about what it's doing. It's taking all of the stuff that was ever said by Abraham Lincoln or Eleanor Roosevelt and all the stuff that was ever written about them, and it's predicting a statement based on statistics. No wonder it should be really good at that. It's got so much material that it can use to do that. If I could keep that in my mind, I could probably do it just as well. But that's completely different. And then but if you start to think about the emotional aspects of creativity, the emotion that is creating in an individual, that's something, when you have to switch perspectives and think about who you're engaging with and all that kind of thing. It would be, and that emotional content of our relationships is essential to creativity and why humans are going to continue to need to be involved in that. The emotional system of our brain is also plays a tremendously important role in decision making. So we'd all like to think about decision making as being rational and reasoned and all that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is we can't actually make a decision without the limbic system, without our emotional system. It plays a tremendously important role. And without it, we can't really fall off the proverbial fence. We'd be constantly stuck without being able to make decisions. And I did another webinar on that. So if anybody's interested in that aspect of, we're not going to go into depth today, but we can send you a link for that. So obviously, we need to have these cognitive skills well developed, which means they need to be working at an automatic level without conscious thought. These are skills that happen non-consciously, pretty much in fractions of a second. So as we think about how to do this, and especially as educators start to do this, because the way that we approach cognitive skill development is kind of different from how we approach a lot of the rest of education. Because how do I explain to someone how to hold more information in their mind? That is to build their working memory. How do you help someone to automatically see a variety of possibilities or shift when priorities change? How well does telling students to stop and think work if their brains aren't fluent at pausing and regrouping? So, in order to get these skills at that kind of automatic level where we need them to be, we can do that, but it's not by traditional instruction. We can train them. And the program that we use is called Brainware Safari. It's essentially clinical therapy for all of these cognitive skills that has been built into a digital game-based format. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit of one of the many studies that we've done in schools to show what this can accomplish, particularly with respect to executive functions.
Betsy, I think this is a really good point that you're bringing up, because one of our guests, one of our moms, was wondering if these types of learning skills are used in schools. So this is perfect on how you actually
Right.
use these cognitive skills in the school setting.
Yes. So we do work with a number of different schools, and I'm glad if somebody's on and asking that question today. This was a school in Kokomo, Indiana, a middle school. And what we did, we worked with them for a number of years. And one year, what we did was look at the students who on a cognitive test scored well with their reasoning skills. So on this chart, you can see, I think I'm going to get my annotation tool out. So these three bars, spatial perception, verbal reasoning, and abstract reasoning, are the three different types of complex reasoning skills that are assessed in Mindprint. And you can see these are percentile rankings. So these kids are right bumping up against the top of the middle of the expected range. They're strong, and that's why we selected them. But they were also not doing well academically, and we selected them because their executive functions, which is these three bars on the left, so attention, which is overlaps with inhibitory control, working memory, and then cognitive flexibility. So that's where they're not even within the average range. So really good thinkers, but kids who have issues with executive functions. And we've just emphasized how important those are. And I'm going to erase my things. And then I'm going to go. And in fact, as I mentioned, we also selected them because they were struggling academically. So despite how smart they are, their ability to learn and understand and sort out all these complex ideas and whatever, only about 20% of them, 25% of them were scoring at or above proficiency. Actually, none of them were scoring at or above proficiency. Only 20 or 25% were even in the approaching range on the state standardized test the year before they did their cognitive training program. Just to also give you a sense, I talked about this is the usage. There was a range of usage, but the recommended usage, we would want to see an average in the mid 30s to 40 range. So it's pretty close. So what you're going to see is not perhaps as great a change as it could be, although it's still quite dramatic. But I just wanted to include this information for those of you who are, thinking about what kind of what it's like to implement it. So it's basically 3 to 5 times a week for at least 12 to 14 weeks. This is what it looks like, the cognitive assessment and the gains that were made afterwards. And so they were already doing really well, obviously, with their reasoning. But now you've got them also making big strides in terms of their attention, in terms of their working memory, and in terms of their flexible thinking. And in fact, the average growth for these students on the 3 executive functions was 15 percentile points, which equates to almost a half of a standard deviation. So that's a very significant change. So it's possible to help develop these skills if we do it the right way. So I'm going to get rid of these and close this. And even though they were still working in brainware in their cognitive training, when it came time for the spring assessments, we already start to see an impact on their academics, with 5% of this group of students now performing at or above proficiency in ELA, 10% in math, and many fewer performing in that below. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to track them beyond that year, but we have with other groups where we see the changes stick. They continue to perform at a much better rate over time. So really a couple of things that I want to focus on now as we start to get towards the end of the presentation, which is and kind of pulling it all together. There are 2 directions that I want to highlight. First of all is that we need to help our students develop their cognitive skills. There are already so many kids who can't qualify for jobs, who don't have these basic executive functions that they need to be successful, and that's the demand is only going to get stronger and stronger as AI becomes part of everything we do. These are the essence of human capacity and learning. And so the brain strengths, which include, insight, judgment, creativity, empathy, all of those rely on, and all of the other skills that we talked about, planning and adaptability and communication and collaboration, all of those are founded on these underlying cognitive processes. They're truly the foundation of human strength and human capacity. So I believe very strongly that we need to help students develop these. The other thing we need to do is we have to instruct students in harnessing the capacity of AI to do things that humans don't need to do, and not to be over reliant. We looked at the pitfalls, and they're there for sure. But if we don't have those cognitive skills, and if we don't have the right kind of instruction in how to use AI to do the things that we shouldn't have to do as humans, and to really amplify our potential, it's not instinctive. It's not something that kids automatically know how to do, any more than they automatically know how to do homework or automatically know how to stand in line before they get to kindergarten and first grade. There are things skills that we need to teach them, and this is surely one of them. I wanted to come back just for a minute because this really plays in here, this whole concept of trust, to that original poll, and sort of as part of maybe this instructional process, thinking about this whole question of, can you trust AI? I want to put it in a little bit different context, because trust is something that I think about and talk about a lot, as Lou can tell you. So think about this for a minute in your own life. Who do you trust? Who do you truly trust? Do you trust them completely? What do you trust? Do I trust my car? Mostly. Do I trust my toaster not to burn the toast? Mostly, but have I ever burned something in the kitchen? Yeah. Should we trust AI? Well, AI isn't a person. We talked about what AI is. It's a statistical prediction based on lots and lots and lots of data, but it's a statistical prediction. So thinking about it in that context, maybe we can't trust AI, but maybe we can't trust AI any more than a person or a search engine or what we read on the news or hear on the news. Like everything else in life, we need to develop our experience and be aware of what the source and the motivations are. We can do that with people. We can do that with the news because they're driven by humans. When it comes to AI, it's the process, not necessarily the motivation that we need to be distrustful of. But when we understand the process, we know it's not 100% reliable, but nor is anything else. And so including this as part of our instruction, I think is really going to be, it's kind of the nature of technology. And only humans can actually make those human judgments. So as I started to think about, what I might focus on in instruction of effective use of AI, I started to think about, the fact that a lot of schools, I think, and a lot of classrooms are maybe creating limits. You can't use it for this, or you can only do whatever. But creating limits is only as good as the limits are in place. And then it'd be far better to create competence and the ability to make these judgments and to use it in a competent and effective way. We really need to understand how the human brain learns for this. Like that example that I gave of the teacher with the civil rights movement lessons. Unless you understand how the human brain learns and what's going to really create deep, enduring understanding and learning, we're going to not be effective in instructing AI any more than we are in reading and math and all the other things that we believe kids need to know. And finally, ownership and responsibility, I think, is something that we need to focus on. And teaching what that means, teaching, the responsibility, just like we do everything else. I remember one, actually, it was Tom Hughes, who was the principal of that middle school that I was talking about earlier, who said, kids don't necessarily know how to take responsibility or be respectful or do any of these other things. We think they're going to learn it along the way, but sometimes we have to figure out other ways to teach those skills. And so in terms of, so I came up with an idea of an assessment or of an assignment that you could think of. And so if I had a group of kids, here's what I thought I might do, and love anybody's input, love your other ideas. This is just a starting point. It's a suggestion for you to play around with. Just you could ask ChatGPT for the same thing, but just write something, a short piece. Maybe it's a recent event in your life. There should be a T there. Ask ChatGPT to suggest modifications. Go through those suggestions, explain why you agree and disagree with them. As you use the suggestions to improve, that doesn't mean accepting them all. It means using them as a springboard to make changes, to make your written work better, whatever you think better is. That's a human judgment. Then ask ChatGPT to rewrite your description according to the changes and compare what you wrote to what GPT wrote. Most likely, you may have made some changes that ChatGPT won't have made because ChatGPT is just going by the changes that it already came up with. So getting what did you learn from this? Having some discussion about it. Write a disclosure statement that explains how you used AI in this assignment. I think this is a skill that's going to be essential. And here's my disclosure for today's presentation. AI was used to help in the creation. It created the image on the first slide of the human hand and the robot hand.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm not an artist, so I love that image. It
Yeah.
really is something that I couldn't do, but that I think really helps with the whole communication. And I'm happy to give it credit. And actually, I used, just so you know, I used Copilot, Microsoft Copilot for that. I did ask it to do some drafting of specific content within parameters that I set. I asked it to suggest the poll questions. It was not used at all to summarize the research. I read the research and I thought about it deeply. It didn't present the research or the data from our research. It didn't generate the assignment idea, although I could have asked it to do that. In any case, I am solely responsible for everything in this presentation. And I think we need to make sure that our students understand and that we understand what that means. So with that, I would love to see if there are questions.
Oh, they've had some really good discussions going on here throughout your whole presentation. Very impressed. We've got a great group of listeners out there. One of the questions was, do AI lesson plans take into account brain development in younger kids? And I assume expected skills at grade levels are taken into AI. Also, is AI database biased towards socioeconomic group?
So yes, because the only thing that can create databases are humans, and there is human bias. So, and there has been some research that's been done. I can't quote it to you, but we could go look it up. But I do believe that they have demonstrated some bias in different databases, and different tools use different databases. Increasingly, it's going to enable you to understand more about that, pick and choose, develop your own databases. It only if it, I've had limited success. I've had some success in devising a lesson plan, but it depends on, there's
Okay, for a minute we lost you, Betsy. The screen
okay.
froze.
Well, I lost you, but
Okay.
hopefully everybody else is.
Okay.
So there are in fact there's a specific tool that does help. It's designed to help with lesson planning, and I will try to look that up and find that and share that afterwards. I don't know exactly how it works, so I really can't speak to that. I don't think that, I think if you ask ChatGPT to take into account some of the important principles of spaced practice, the common things that apply across all students, basically, in terms of the science of learning, it might, respond to that, but you might have to give it some specific direction. What we have not experimented with yet, so I can't tell you whether it would work, is the degree to which it could, based on an individual student's cognitive strengths and weaknesses, develop a plan. And that's something for us to think
That
about.
would be great. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, that's good.
Other questions?
Let me see. Uh, earlier, one of them was asking about getting the written notes, for example. I was thinking of a school board meeting, how great that would be you know how your secretary's writing like mad, trying to do everything, where if they could just get the summary of the meeting and then she could go or he could go through and correct it or change it, and that would save so much time when you think of all those meetings that we've had, you know.
Right. Well, just so you guys know, you can do that.
Mhm.
If you take a file, a recorded file, and it could be a video, it could be just an audio file. In fact, we can do this. I'll do this with the audio file that comes out of today's webinar. I'm going to give it to Chat GPT and I'm going to ask it to summarize it, and it will do it. And it'll take a little, the longest thing will be actually uploading the audio, and parsing that. But then when it does it's very fast and it's very good. So
Yeah.
now you should read it because voice recognition is also not perfect yet. But it's yeah. I mean, that's something that's within reach of pretty much anybody on this call.
Mhm.
A great idea. All right. Well, we've been over a little over an hour, so I just really want to thank everybody. This more perhaps than most any other webinar I've done. This one was a learning experience for me, and I got to really examine sort of some of my thinking and what's going on. So it was a great experience to do this. I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you found it helpful. Here's our contact information. Once again, I should put Lou's on here too. I don't know why I didn't do that, but
It's fine.
just because it came from another one. But anyway.
Great audience. Your comments were wonderful. We've had such good conversations going on, connecting with one another. The networking is important, so we'll keep in touch with everyone. Okay, it's great.
All right.
Very
Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your week, and a great October starting tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.